Please welcome Daryl Dulaney, President and CEO of Siemens Industry.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, Gabriel. Appreciate it. Well, I'm really happy to be here. I'm surprised there's so many people. If I'd have known there were going to be this many people, I'd ask for half the gate. I don't know how much you paid to get in, but half of it might, I don't know, may not be much. I don't know. But it's great to be here. I thought I would talk to you a little bit about something newer in Siemens, this infrastructure in cities thing that we're doing. There's a lot to Siemens. It's a big company. And I'll show you a few stats about Siemens. But rather than try to go broad, a mile wide and an inch deep, I thought we would go a little bit deeper and something that's a little bit newer. Also, I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we value and how we look at our employees at Siemens. Because we get a lot of good employees from Georgia Tech. And we have about 3,000 job openings in the US alone. Well, you can figure it out from there if you're interested. Maybe there's something in my talk that will pique your interest to be interested in joining the Siemens team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you see here, infrastructure and American cities. It's quite a dialogue that's going on right now. But first I thought I would just mention a little bit about what Siemens is. Siemens is really set up with 4 sectors, which really align to sectors in the economy. And you see them up here on the screen, the energy, healthcare, industry, and this last one, which is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about, which is infrastructure in cities. You see the divisions that make up these sectors, which again is the organizational setup of Siemens. The energy piece is primarily supply-side energy, power generation. And that's what you see there, the power generation, wind, solar, oil and gas, plus transmission. About a third of all the electricity in the United States is generated on Siemens turbines at utilities. And we control about 40% of the electric grid in the US. You see then healthcare, we're one of the largest manufacturers of healthcare equipment, imaging, diagnostics, clinical products, and those kinds of things. And then in industry, this is primarily an industrial-focused sector, which is primarily industrial automation and drivetrains. Those are the gears and workings inside of things. About half of all the wind turbines are filled with Siemens drives, plus motors and gearing and all of those kinds of things. All that's in industry. And then, as I said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about infrastructure in cities. I have responsibility for infrastructure in cities in North America, from Canada down through Panama. But then I also am responsible for Siemens Industry, Inc., which is a 22,000 employee organization here in the US. That's a US-based company. But a little bit more about Siemens, and then we can move on to infrastructure in cities. This gives you a little snapshot here of Siemens in terms of our size and number of employees. This is from 2011. This is our last publicly reported full fiscal year, which begins in October through September. And you'll see by revenue, this is in euros. So you can, for the math majors out there, say about a 1.35 times. So in US dollars, it's about 100 billion a year in sales. We have about 360,000 employees globally. We work out of 190 countries around the world. So this gives you a little bit information of where the sales come from by region. The US is the largest single country for sales, about 20, a little over 20 billion. And then Siemens Industry, Inc., the part I'm part of, is about half of that. So then you see a few of the key figures here. Again, these are in millions of euros. So that gives you just a little bit of information about Siemens. What I really want to talk to you about is this piece here, getting to cities and infrastructure. We like to refer to that we're in the urban millennium. It wasn't that long ago. In fact, I think it was right around the end of October. I don't know if you were following it in the news. we sort of theoretically in the world crossed 7 billion people on the planet. And it wasn't just in 1999 we crossed 6 billion. And I think by 2025 we're going to be at the next billion. The point is, of course, that population is growing, and it's growing rapidly at an increasing rate. Additionally, there's this global megatrend of people moving to cities, urbanization. You know, in the US, there's between 82 to 84% of the entire population lives in the metropolitan area of cities now. And, you know, in the big picture of history, it wasn't that long ago, you know, we were very rural. China, which is, of course, one of the most populated countries in the world, and has always been a very rural country, just this year crossed over into an urban country. They just crossed the 50% mark of their population. And this is living in cities. This is happening all over the world. But there's real serious implications to this as this is happening. And you can see that, first of all, cities have become really the economic engine of the world, with the majority of the GDP around the world generated in cities. It's where people live. And because of that, where people live and work, of course, it has the biggest impact on environment in terms of emissions and energy consumption. So this is a big mega trend that's happening all over the world, and certainly in the US also. And what that means is that there's special problems that are arising for cities. And we have listed a few of these here, questions that mayors and administrators and others that live and work in and around cities have to answer. How do we get enough electric power to a city? You know, the electrification of our society is just ramping up exponentially. Electricity is really the fuel of now and of the future, even where the strongest sort of cornerstone of petroleum and gas consumption, as you know now, is shifting towards electric cars. And when you look at all of our lives, everything that we touch involves electricity. And so this is getting to be a big problem, particularly in cities that the infrastructure hasn't really been designed for that kind of load and consumption. So how do they do that? How do we get goods in and out of the city? There's also waste that has to come out of the city. Traffic, and you know, those of us that drive around Atlanta, I don't have to tell you about traffic and commuting. It's very bad here. It just wasn't built for the amount of population and the needs of the workforce to get to and from their place of work. Energy consumption and emissions, security and safety. You know, I had an interesting conversation with Mayor Reed, and we were talking about priorities. And his number one priority, of course, for the city of Atlanta is safety. And we were talking about energy and other things. And he said, you know, it's hard to be concerned about your electric bill when you get hit on the head and your car gets jacked on the way to the parking lot. You know, so safety is really what people first and foremost are concerned about. And certainly it's true of places of learning, colleges, universities, schools. If you ask the number one priority, it's not really education, it's the safety of the students that are entrusted in their care on their campus. So this is a big issue. And finally, the last piece there is, how does all this get paid for? How are you going to finance all this? City budgets are tight, they're strapped, but yet the demand isn't going away. The needs to solve these problems do not go away. Additionally, and you see this on the blue banner below, in the past, when you wanted to fix a problem, you looked at that problem in and of itself, in its silo. If you have a water problem, water distribution problem, or whatever, you get a water solution. But what cities are discovering now is that there's power in having multiple systems be integrated through technology so that they can work together to meet priorities, exchange information, and the like. Good example is in big cities, and we have some examples of this, where they need to reduce their electricity use in city-owned buildings, for example. And the local utility company needs to get rid of peak demand because they don't want to add capacity. We don't want to build new power plants. But by having the building automation systems that operate the infrastructure of buildings, talking to the utilities via a smart grid, we now can shift the loads enough that we have plenty of capacity without adding and without disrupting service to the population. So it's examples like these where we have multiple systems. In that example, how we generate power, the system of how we distribute it, and the system of how we control the consumption, all working together, and we have lower emissions, we have less capital invested in power generation, and the whole sort of system just works better by integrating these systems. So, get the next slide going here. I'm not sure which way to point this. Anybody know? Point it at my head? Well, I don't know. Maybe somebody else can move this forward? This doesn't seem to be advancing. Maybe somebody has a PC, we can just punch the little forward button. There we go. Which one was it? You pushing this one? Yeah, okay. Must not be pushing properly. And this is a growing trend. And for those of us in business, we care about what's happening today, but we really care about how that market will develop. If something is hot today and it's not hot tomorrow, we're not that interested in it. We need something. But this is a big megatrend that's happening all over the globe. And this is some independent research, Pike Research, that did this. And the only thing I'll point out here, it doesn't matter all the numbers, but the point here is that the demand and the expenditures around smart buildings, transportation, utilities, et cetera, this is projected to grow about 18% annually through 2020. And then if we look just a little bit closer here in North America, we see in these same statistics a compound, double-digit compound annual growth rates. And so that draws investment. So we know that there's a sustaining market. It's going to grow. There's a sustaining demand. We're close to mayors. I mean, in the U.S. alone, Siemens has over 700 physical locations, infrastructure in cities. We have about 475 locations in the U.S. We're wherever. And so we're close to the communities. We know the administrators. And the demand is real, and it will continue to grow. So that's good. Now, this gives you a little overview, and I don't know if everybody can read this or not, but of the part of the portfolio that Siemens addresses for the cities. And so some of these things that you see, renewable energy, of course, we're very large in that relative to the building of wind turbines, solar farms, and other biomass, other things. I mentioned the power transmission and distribution, which is related to the next block you see there, which is a smart grid. We have a smart grid division, which is a very exciting business. I'll skip around here a little bit. High-speed transportation. We're the largest light rail vehicle manufacturer in the U.S. E-mobility is a big piece relative to vehicle charging, as well as the drivetrain of electrical vehicles. Also, traffic management, which I know would be very welcome in many parts of Atlanta. This is a very important piece that we're learning how to increase the capacity of roads just by smart application of different schemes of how we move cars through. And it's the same with our train business. We control the largest subway system in the world, which is New York Transit Authority, and on their one of their busiest lines, it was at full capacity. Just by smarter control of how trains are moved through the tunnels, we've increased their capacity 40%, which to them is big, obviously, primarily because it defers more capital expenditure. And then, of course, smart buildings is a very big business for us. We're one of the largest companies in the world, but particularly here in the U.S., for the automation of buildings, large non-residential commercial buildings, universities, and the like. Hospitals, I mentioned the lighting. There's many things here. But the point here is that when we go to talk with cities about their problems, we don't do in the sales world, we'll call a bag dive, where you jump in, pull out your brochures and show them everything you can sell them. It's about talking about the problems that are in the city and what their needs are. No one fixes all of their problems all at once. There's prioritization, there's budget constraints, and there's many decisions that go into it from many different constituents around the city. And it takes time to solve city problems. Typically, cities don't have as much expertise as they would like to have, and they rely on third parties to help them solve their problems. And that's really what infrastructure in cities is all about, in terms of engaging with cities and helping them address and solve their problems. Cities are very important to all of us, and I'll go over this in just a moment. But many of us in industry and in Washington, the Brookings Institute's a good example, and their Metropolitan Policy Plan Group, believe that cities will be the leadership of the world. And I believe that's also true here in the US. I think it's pretty clear that we can't really rely on the federal government as much as we used to provide leadership. The gridlock, the political intransigence, it's not a good functioning organization right now, I'm sorry to say, as a loyal American. But what we can say is that cities aren't waiting for the federal government to solve these problems. When you talk to mayors and talk to other organizations that support cities, they're moving forward. They know what the problems are. They know they need solutions. They're engaging with it. Certainly Mayor Reed is very active in this, particularly around transportation and safety and other priorities that he has. And certainly, if we are going to solve the problems for cities, cities have to go forward themselves. I spoke to, just a couple of weeks ago, to the former Mayor Daley in Chicago. And Mayor Daley was saying, over his history, he didn't really care about his policy, his party. I mean, he cared about it, but what he really cared most about was his city. And that, of course, he's a Democrat. And George Bush, he said, probably did more for him than any president who's a Republican. And that's the way mayors are. They're closest to their city. They're closer to their city than they are their party. And so they're not waiting. They're moving forward, and they need the support and help because these things don't go away. And here's an example in Houston, Texas, where they talked with us about they needed to reduce their electric consumption. And so just as one phase that we helped them with is they changed out their traffic signals. You can see that 2,400 traffic signals, 7,000 pedestrian signals. There's over 40,000 LED new lights that went in. And this saves them a lot of money, over $1 million, $1.3 million a year, plus an additional $500,000 in operational savings and not having to service old equipment. And this was done through a performance contract. A performance contract is something that's very popular with public entities. It's where when you put in an energy efficient system, it reduces the amount of energy that you use, obviously, and you're not buying energy as much as you were. You can take the avoided cost and apply it to the financing to buy the system, so that given a level cost of energy, essentially you can have all new energy efficient systems that pay for themselves. They reduce emissions, they improve the quality of the environment because it's new, modern technology. And at the end of the finance term, once that's paid off, of course, again, given a level cost of energy, nobody knows what's going to happen to energy in the future. Then they go cash positive on the project. So this is very popular in cities, and this gets back to that finance question. You hear a lot about public and private partnerships. That's where private investors put in a new system, and then the public entity just pays for the service. They just buy the electricity or buy the water or pay for parking or the toll on the toll road. All of these things are privatization of public assets that can be done in a way that improves the infrastructure of the city and can be done in a way that recognizes the tight budgets and the financial constraints that cities have. So we did that for Houston. They were very happy about it. They also have traffic problems when they built the Reliant Stadium, trying to get people in and out based on where they build it, so we put in a light rail system for them. They wanted to reduce energy in their buildings, so we have been working through the city of Houston, improving the energy efficiency of their buildings. There's a couple listed there. And then, of course, Reliant Park went in, and that's so important to a community. They identify with their sports teams and the quality of the stadiums. And we did all the infrastructure for that, all the automation for heating and cooling and lighting and safety, security, fire systems, access control, all of that in Reliant Park. So it's just an example of when we get engaged with cities, it's about finding out what their needs are and bringing the right solutions. Okay, I'm not pushing the button right again. Let's try it again. I said, do you have magic? You want to use your magic fingers again? Oh, okay. Don't touch that one. So you're telling me I'm turning it off. Okay. Anyway, so let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about Siemens and how we look at employees and some of the things that we value. These are things that you'll run into, in your careers that, I think you should look into to see what kind of employer you're talking to. These are our value propositions that we use here. And a value proposition, is directed very sort of focused to a key stakeholder and what they're looking for. So there's different value propositions we're usually familiar with value props for customers, but there's also value propositions for employees and investors. And you see here for the employees, what we really try to do is offer them an opportunity to have a fulfilling career. And there's a lot that goes into that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But what it really means is that they work in an environment of teamwork with strong values, and that we support their development. Individuals have to develop themselves, but they have to have the access to the things that we all need to develop. That means not just training, which certainly is included, but also to have experiences, to contribute to projects, or to be able to move to new jobs, to have access to information, to understand strategies and what their role is in it, to have clear targets and goals so that they know what's expected of them, and they get honest and direct feedback on their performance so that they can reinforce what's going well and address what isn't going well. And so all of these things we look at as the environment where we provide you an opportunity to succeed. And so that's our guarantee and our value proposition for employees. Our customers, they're like, there is sort of a generic customer, and most of them are in competition. You're always trying to win customers, and you always have companies that you're competing with. You have to be competitive. And so our value proposition to our customers is to increase their competitiveness, and with certain other attributes that you see on the screen there. But that's really what it's about. When you work close with a customer, it's important that you develop a loyalty from the customer. If you do a customer survey and you put it on a scale from 1 to 5, and say 3 is neutral, 4 is good, and 5 is very satisfied. We usually want to have 4s and 5s, but the reality of it is a 5 is many, many times more important than a 4, because when someone's satisfied, they could very well be open to another company could satisfy them. But when you sort of peg the meter on satisfaction, you create a loyalty that they will no longer risk the level of service they're getting from you or quality they're getting from you in switching to a competitor. So it's very important that we drive customer loyalty. And to do that, you have to be very close in understanding the needs of your customers. This is why we focus on vertical markets, to understand very specifically an industry and what their needs are, what their business environment is, what their competitive pressures are. And once you have done that and they see you as an extension of their staff, you're in there for a long time. And then for our investors, of course, like most investors, they want profitable growth. And as I often say, until they start accepting shells and beads, and as a return, they're going to want cash. So cash generation is very important, but also the risk management. And the risk is very important because you have to be reliable in terms of the use of your investors' investments, your capital that's employed. You have to drive your business forward successfully. And while you need profitable growth, you have to balance that with risk management. And of course, that's very important. So this piece here, I thought I would throw in because this is really more about the employees, but it puts it in the perspective of these three major stakeholders, which I just addressed relative to the value propositions. And again, the stakeholders being the customer, the employee, and the investors. Certainly, they are equal. And we use this little simple icon of the triangle to remind us that when we make decisions in our company, that we have to keep in mind, how does it affect each of these three stakeholders? Because if you do everything for your customer and treat your employees poorly, you're not going to be taking care of your customers very long. And if you don't do that, you don't have it for the investors. So I don't know, there's probably very few of you who remember a book from a while back. The title of it was "The Customer is Number Two," because number one is the employee. And that's sort of what this represents, because if you see in the verbiage there, we need to have employees have a very positive employment experience where they feel fulfilled and have all the things that I mentioned a few minutes ago and have access to them so that they can apply their talents, have impact, see their results, and feel good about their employer. When employees are well connected and engaged, that they do a terrific job for a customer. It's not a big mystery. A simple kind of metaphor example might be if you went into a grocery store and you bought, say, a can of corn. You go to the cashier and you put it on the counter, and they're rude to you. Throw your change down, they say, "Oh, thank you," whatever. You pick up your corn, you walk out, you look across the street, there's another grocery store. There's a good chance next time you might go across the street. Can of corn is the same. It's all about that employee experience and how they felt about their job and how it reflected to the customer at the checkout counter. And it's no different if you're selling from one mega company to another mega company. It's still people to people. And we want the people that are representing us to our customers to be happy about their job and to be feeling fulfilled and positive that they're on the right mission and that they're represented by the right values. So in that regard, following up on that, these are what we refer to as the 5 cornerstones, which is for employee success. And these are things that we live very directly by, not sort of on the shelf with dust collecting on a 3-ring binder. I have active initiatives around each of these every year with one of my direct reports, which is usually a division president or executive vice president, has to lead this. We have cross-divisional teams that work on this. They tell me what we can achieve in the coming year. We have quarterly reviews of how it's developing, and it really drives teamwork and a high-performance environment. And these things are things like talent sharing. They're also, I should mention, very sort of related to each other. Because if you look at talent sharing, what that means is that we actively move people to new assignments. We don't want people just with sort of one experience for many years because you get very good at that, but it's a bit narrow. And the more experiences that you have, and I would just counsel you in your young careers to seek that out. You need a lot of experiences. It doesn't mean you have to always change jobs, but being involved with projects, initiatives, contributing, it broadens your capabilities and makes you a better and more valuable employee. And that's what relates to this next piece, the career and skill development, diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, I just want to mention that. That's not just about race and gender. It certainly includes those things, but what it really means is that when we work together as a team, we need people from all different backgrounds and experiences because the more diversity that you have in your work, the fewer blind spots that you have relative to your decision making. And that's important for success. And so we need to ensure that we not only have diversity in race and gender, but we have diversity in thought and in experiences. The inclusion is becoming more and more important relative to our ever increasingly modern society in terms of the restrictions on people's lifestyles, how they live, their family situations. We should be able to include anyone that has the kind of talent that we need to contribute to the company to be able to join our team. If you're a single mom and you can only work from 10 to 2, we can do that. We use remote workstations. It's all digital. It's a mobile workforce. They can be part of the team if they have the talents that are needed and they want to contribute. And that's what inclusion is about. It's about embracing society in a way that you have a very broad experience base, and that anyone with the right talent that matches your needs is part of the team. And of course, I think I covered team collaboration through some of those descriptions. And of course, zero harm culture. We have a lot of manufacturing facilities. We make everything from little electronic things to great big things that are, a drivetrain for a 3 megawatt wind turbine is bigger than an SUV, and it's basically a big solid chunk of metal, and the last thing you want is it on your toe, I can tell you. We have a lot of factories, and we want to make sure that employees, when they come home at night, they're in no worse shape than when they left that morning. They may have problems, but hopefully not worsened by going to work. So these are things that, again, are very important to us and that we live in a very real way. So I think those are my opening comments. And there's so much to talk about. I would say in my career, I was fortunate, I think, lucky. And anyone that's really, I think, achieves at least some of their aspirations has some luck along the way, and people that help you and those kinds of things. But I fell into a general management job with P&L when I was very young, in my 20s. And I've basically been in general management functions my whole career. And so I have seen a lot of situations and worked with a lot of people that started early in their careers. I think the most important thing early in your career is really two things. One is that you seek out experiences. And the second is that no matter what experience you're having, you focus on it. Don't focus on the next step. Focus on that one. Do your best. Be high quality in what you do. Care about what you do every day that you get up and your feet hit the floor. Care about the quality of that day. And certainly work is part of it. It's not the only part of it, but it's an important part. If you do those two things, you won't have any problem with your career. Thanks very much. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them if I can.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just wondering, what is Siemens' major differentiator from Siemens competitors, like GE, for example?
Yeah. Clearly, Siemens defines itself around technology. And certainly, our technology is very leading in the world. We put a lot of money into R&D. In the U.S. alone, we spend over $1 billion a year in R&D. So the technology base and the integration of technologies is a real cornerstone for Siemens. Additionally, our portfolio base is so broad, and that, in fact, I'm not aware of any company that has as broad a portfolio as Siemens does. And with the sharing of technological platforms, we have a lot of integration between them so that when we work with a customer to help them achieve their goals, we have a lot of tools in the bag, so to speak. So I think that's probably the biggest.
I have another question. Okay, I work for Siemens as well.
You work for Siemens?
Yeah, I do.
Ah, good.
I've
Good
been
choice.
working for Siemens 9 years in Siemens Spain, Madrid, Siemens UK,
okay.
Manchester, and 1 year in Atlanta.
Ah, terrific.
Siemens Corp.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
terrific.
it's supply chain. But
Yeah,
anyway, my
okay.
question is, Siemens has set a target for 100 billion revenue
Yes.
to achieve in a short, medium term.
Yeah, 100 billion euros.
It's not
Yeah.
been defined when we have to deliver the target, but do you think that's realistic? And if, in order to achieve the target, what's going to be key for Siemens?
Well, first of all, they haven't stated a date for that. But absolutely, it's achievable. There's no question about it. Take the U.S. It wasn't that many years ago. We were pretty small here, and as I said, we're north of 20 billion now. There have been the majority of that growth has just come in the last 15 years. So I think the issue is you have to put goals and targets out there that cause people to stretch. Because, I mean, that's really the only way to get ahead. The most famous example, which many people always use, was when President Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon. At that time, there was no technology to get to the moon. I can imagine everyone in the space program almost passed out, when he said that. But putting that stretch target out there, it was achieved. Yes, it's achievable. No date stated, but I can tell you from an internal management perspective, we're all working pretty hard on it. There's not just a little bit of pressure around it. There's one down there.
Mr. Dulaney, over here. Hi. Going back to your talk about smart cities and infrastructure, I was wondering if you had any comments about at what point cities should maybe limit themselves in terms of growth and improvements, if there could be a drawback after a while.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit self-limiting in terms, and from my perspective, in terms of infrastructure. When you don't have the right quality of life, and people won't live there, or people will leave it, and we see that dynamic, over history. When you see when manufacturing collapsed in the Midwest and the automotive was bad, the population flight out of key cities in that industry was pretty significant. These things have a way of self-limiting, and usually in a negative way. What people in many surveys, what people really want is a quality of life, and that's really defined by some of the things we talked about: a safe environment, jobs, access to transportation, affordable transportation, clean water, affordable electric, and a good environmental quality. If you have horrible pollution problems, it doesn't bring a lot of people into the city. The interesting thing is, and we've talked to mayors all over the world, they all know that they're in a competition together. And what they're competing for is to bring companies to the city. And Atlanta and the agencies that work with the city to bring businesses in work it very hard. Every city works it very hard. And the reason is, with the urbanization, with people growing, they have to provide jobs. If they don't have jobs, then they have unemployment, which leads to terrific social problems. Again, safety, crime goes up when people can't feed themselves. The cost of health care goes up because it has to be provided. There are many issues that, and without businesses, your tax revenues aren't there. So your costs go up, your revenues go down. It's a horrific spiral that no city, wants to face. And so I think, a city in a way is a living organism that, to be healthy, needs certain things. And as long as it's healthy, it can grow. And that's sort of the infrastructure, is health and the quality of life. If it isn't there, it's not going to grow. And again, it kind of self-limits it. Yeah.
Hi. You mentioned earlier the 4 different sectors of Siemens: the energy, healthcare, industry, and infrastructure.
Yep.
Do you find that there's an overall corporate strategy that guides those different sectors, or do they sort of operate independently?
Well, the sectors are very empowered to make their own strategic decisions and to manage their operations around the world. So they very much are, self-empowered in that way. At the same time, there are horizontal issues that cuts across all of Siemens. Certainly, there's an ongoing portfolio management that happens at corporate in Siemens, which is headquartered in Munich. And they make decisions about the setup, and they would make the decision around the sector and the creation of this 4th sector, infrastructure and cities. But relative to the individual businesses within the sectors make most, if not all, of those decisions. But there is an overarching strategy relative to integrated technology company, meaning we're not a conglomerate where each business is totally independent. But we bring businesses into the portfolio that have synergy within the portfolio. Sometimes that's technology, sometimes it's market access. There's a key fit for all of them that is overseen, by corporate. So it's a great question, but it's something that we would have to sit and talk a little bit more about. But in general, in the big picture, Siemens cares about that the portfolio addresses the megatrends in the market, and that there is an integration for technology, and then within those sectors, the sector leadership manages their businesses and portfolio.
Over here.
Yeah.
With a company as big as Siemens is and going across a lot of different countries and cultures, how do you work to make a unified and a strong culture within the organization itself?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I tell you, it's one of the most important things that I do is to shepherd the culture here in the U.S. Every country has its own norms and society, and they develop their own culture. Now, there's certain culture that runs across all of Siemens: respect for the individual, integrity, compliance with laws. These things are foundational relative to the way we operate, which creates a certain corporate culture. We communicate, we take care of people, we develop them. We don't walk from jobs. There's many things that we do that creates a certain orientation and culture. But relative to locally, for example, here in the U.S., or Mexico, or Canada, or Spain, or wherever, they have their own cultures and the way that they communicate, the way that they work together, the way that they collaborate. And these are things that certainly I spend a lot of time on. So it's a little bit related to the last question we had, in that there's sort of an overarching set of values, which innovation and excellence, doing things, excellence and integrity, all of those things. But then again, locally, a good example is in the U.S., volunteerism is very important. And we're very active in volunteerism. Well, in fact, I don't know if anyone's seen it, just north of here, we are sponsoring the first solar-powered home for Habitat for Humanity. I think we pledged like $100,000 to help it, and then we have people that work it. But it's all around volunteerism, and Siemens has an organization called Siemens Caring Hands, and that's sort of an overarching organization that helps support local operations of Siemens when they get involved in their community for volunteerism and giving and the like. That's very important to us. In some countries, in fact in Germany, volunteerism is almost unheard of. It's not something that they do. Their government is a little more social and does more of that. It's paid by people in their taxes. But in the U.S., we're a little bit different. We don't do as much as that, and many organizations need our contributions and our involvement around volunteerism. And in American society, not uniquely, but in the US, because of this, we grow up in that culture and we don't think about it, but certainly as we get older and as adults, many of us really feel good about giving and participating and volunteering. That's a cultural thing. That's something that we have to reflect in the way we manage our business, because our business is us. We are our business. It's the people that live and work in and around their place of business. And we have to support the things that culturally are important locally. So again, a little bit related, there's an overarching piece, and then there's the local piece, which we also have to take care of. Yeah.
You touched on the importance of the employees feeling satisfaction with their job and
Yeah, sure.
extending that to the customer. With a company as big as Siemens, how do you ensure that each employee feels that value that they really add to the company?
We beat them regularly. We beat it into them. No. No. We don't do that. No. It comes in everything that we do. I mean, we have massive amounts of training for the direct employee, training for supervisors, for management, for the executive team. It's permeated throughout all of our operations relative to collaboration, talent sharing. We track it, we have metrics. If we have nothing else, we have measurements. I can tell you in our most recent initiative that we started on the talent sharing, just in my operation in SII, we moved, I think, 51 senior executives from one division or business unit to another one, because that was proposed by the executive team that they needed to do more of that to get the leadership moved around, because leaders that don't move around, surprise, don't move their people around either. They hang on to their high performers and the like. So we thought we got to move the executives around. But it was terrific. So it's at every layer and the things that we do. It's all about supporting success, which always comes back to the employee. I don't care what business you're in or what you're doing. If you're one person designing one product that gets shipped everywhere, if you don't like your job, I mean, it's not going to succeed. It always comes back to people and the employees. And if that doesn't permeate your organization, I'm going to guess you're not long in business.
Hi, Mr. Dulaney. You talked about that you try to guarantee a strong values environment for your employees.
Strong, I'm sorry.
Strong values. But strong.
Yeah, right.
Well, I come from Argentina, and Siemens is well known for the 2008 scandal of bribery, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know what measures did you take after that to, assure that you can guarantee this thing?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked it. There was a scandal from management in years past, and it wasn't in the U.S. In fact, there was a terrific investigation. We spent, I don't know how much resource and time and all that to really dig it out in the whole world. And this continues on today. This has been going on for 3 years now. Anyone that had touched that we know of is no longer with the company. And we have instituted certain compliance processes, organization processes, rules, checks. It was really an overhaul of the corporation around compliance. The Dow Jones Sustainability Index rates companies around a number of elements that ensure that a company is sustainable. That means more than environmental. And we were ranked number 1, in the world. So the revamp has gained terrific traction. We are a best practice for compliance organizations around the world now. And I'd say it was a real terrific amount of work to get everything installed that needed to be installed globally. And again, it was all installed here in the U.S. Again, I'll repeat, we didn't have any issues here in the U.S., but we have installed all of the processes, structure in place. And I mean, one of my direct reports that works on my staff is the compliance officer for infrastructure in cities. And everything we do is vetted carefully, and the training is continuous. It's not a flu shot, not something you get once a season. You know, it's always and ongoing.
Hi.
Hi.
So here in America, we have what can only be best termed as higher speed rail. Do
Yes.
you project a market for high speed intercity rail that would allow cities to compete as regional units instead of the current city by city competition?
Yeah, I do, and I know it's got fits and starts. There are many issues involved in high speed transportation. Some of the things involved are that the safety regulations from the FRA, the federal organization that monitors regulations for trains, our regulations for safety are set based basically on mass, big steel cages. We make trains in California. We drag 5,000 pieces of metal in one end of the shop and roll out these beautiful, sleek trains out the other end. And interestingly, it's one of the most green manufacturing sites in America. We generate 85% of all the power that's used on site at the solar field. It was a 2 megawatt solar installation on site, which, by the way, the employees love because there's not enough roof, even though it's a big factory. We had to cover the parking lot too. And in Sacramento in the summer, it gets really hot, the sun. They're all parking in the shade now. It's all solar panels, so they love it. But they're proud of it too because they're so green now. But in order to go fast, you have to be light. And so a lot of the safety regulation, which is based around big heavy steel cages, you can't move that stuff that fast. So it takes rail automation, what's referred to now as positive train control, where you put automation in all the trains, so all the trains know where each other are. So no matter what the operator does, there are certain rules that the operator can't violate. If a train is supposed to stop, this is an example in New York City in their transit. Some years ago, they had some fatality there because of an operator was texting and went past a stoplight in the subway. That can't happen anymore because we've installed automation controls in the trains. If he doesn't see it, the train stops. It's going to stop no matter what the operator wants. So we have to have positive train control. Another aspect is even if we want to use existing rail, the road beds aren't built for it. Our road beds, railroad beds, are built for freight. And nobody cares if the freight's doing this. But if you go 120 miles an hour, that doesn't work so good. You're not on the tracks very long. And so there's a lot of bed improvement that has to happen. And that is happening. Some of the lines in the Midwest between, and I may get these cities wrong, I know Chicago and I believe Detroit and maybe St. Louis, they're doing road bed improvements for the future so that we can do that. To put rail in, obviously, it has a lot of issues around eminent domain and other challenges, both socially and politically, to get them in. But I believe it will. Many cities recognize it. We had a little setback when the Tea Party reared up on its hind legs, and politicians were afraid if they supported anything that would be expensive, they wouldn't get elected. So we have mayors in Florida and in Wisconsin, not taking money that was being given to them to put in a rail because they were worried about expenses of operation in the future. And many studies have shown it's economically a terrible decision for the state, but it's politics. Like I said, Yeah, don't get me started. Anyway, I already started, didn't I? But anyway, we also know, in fact, Brookings just published a fantastic paper on this, that not only are cities important, but I think you're alluding to it. What we're really finding is that cities that are near each other have the opportunity, when linking themselves, to accelerate their economic growth in terms of GDP, much faster than a city on its own can. And so there are certain cities that are already staged for this: Dallas-Fort Worth, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and even some that are a little further apart. And this is something that is really recognized. The key catalyst to unlocking this potential is the commuter transportation. You have to be able to move labor between the two, and high-speed rail is the way to do it efficiently. So, I think, I wish I could attribute this quote, and I wish I remembered it exactly. I think it was Churchill. He said, Americans always do the right thing after they have exhausted all other options. And I think high-speed rail will be another exhibit of that.
So my question was also about high-speed rail, so I think you answered most of it. But I guess as a little bit of a follow-on, what part of the growth in inner-city passenger rail do you see Siemens being a part of? Do you see them waiting on the sidelines till everything's electrified, or trying to get in at some of this diesel-electric higher speed rail on freight right-of-ways and such?
Well, right now we are the number one train manufacturer and provider for light rail vehicles, like the Metra here. We just sold new streetcars to Atlanta, and they'll be delivered here in the near future. They spent $17 million on some new streetcars with us. We have in many cities around the U.S., we have light rail and streetcars. So it's a pretty big business for us right now, and it's 10-figure business right now. So it's already a big business. But we will participate in the whole gamut of growth in rail transportation. And example of that is we just not long ago signed a contract with Amtrak, and we're providing 70 new energy-efficient locomotives for the Northeast Corridor. That was $500 million sales, $500 million. So we were pretty happy about that. So that went well. In fact, Secretary LaHood, Secretary of Transportation, just 2 weeks ago, was in Sacramento at our manufacturing site. So we're very plugged in to the whole transportation, not just rail, but certainly including rail. And we work advocacy for this in Washington pretty hard. Yeah.
You got any magnet lines coming online in the USA?
Any what?
Magnet, like in Shanghai.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, the maglev, magnetic levitation, maglev. Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of. I think we just got to get to higher speed rail first. But that's a fascinating technology. And the accents they had over there wasn't the technology. They have operator issues there.
Mr. Dulaney,
Yeah.
if you had the opportunity to put Siemens resources to work on the city of Atlanta to improve its sustainability, what would the 3 priorities be that you would focus on?
Well, I think we have a lot to contribute around transportation and safety and energy efficiency. I think those 3 are real keys. We do many other things, and the city has many needs, but I think those are at the top of the list. As I said, I know Mayor Reed, his top priority is safety, and probably second, I shouldn't speak for him. I haven't actually seen his rank ordering. I've heard him say very directly safety is number 1. But he's working transportation very hard to extend Metra, and he's working across the aisle, so to speak. He's working very well with both parties in that, the politicians in the state. And certainly energy efficiency is very, very important. So, I think those three, I think we're working hard on all three of them too with him.
And a second question, more about the culture within Siemens. Sustainability is a key part of your product portfolio.
Yes.
Beyond volunteerism, what are the other things that Siemens is doing to really get sustainability embedded into the culture of the organization?
Well, there's two things. First of all, sustainability for our customers is obviously very important. And so throughout, I think, almost every division we have has a stake in sustainability, energy efficiency, and work very hard on our product development, solutions, services, our projects. All of that is very focused on it because there's a huge demand and customers want that, so we do that. Relative to our own operation, we have sustainability in our own operation initiatives that is led by our Environmental Health and Safety Organization, EHS. That's a direct report to me. And that in our own operations, you have to monitor it, you have to measure it, and you have initiatives, and those are done locally. So we support local grassroots initiatives, and we also support investments where needed that are on a larger scale to improve in that way. So certainly manufacturing sites are a prime target. But not only. We have a lot of many millions of square feet of office space around the U.S. And so each of those, have to have a local focus. We have locations now that have achieved terrific things, from absolute zero waste, zero landfill achievements, and many others relative to water and electricity, et cetera, emissions. So, the thing about sustainability is, like some other things, it comes from us. It comes from a society value. It's things that we care about. And as I said, we are the company. And so we work on the things that we care about. And that's certainly right towards the top of the list.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this will be the last.
Okay, who gets the big question?
We're thinking alike. This will be the last question. Can you give an example of what Siemens is doing in a city, in an emerging economy, to help develop a sustainable infrastructure?
Boy, there's probably better people to ask of that than me that have more of a global overview. I'm sort of North America based, but all over the world, I see fascinating things that are happening. Again, certainly for our customers. For example, in London, they have this horrible traffic pollution problem. And by installing intelligent traffic solutions, we partnered with London and did real-time pricing for use of roads relative to the time of day and the amount of congestion and toll, other aspects that have really helped London move forward. In fact, I'll just mention, this summer we'll be opening a new global center for infrastructure in cities, and it'll actually be in London. It's called the Crystal, but it'll be available for people to see, and it'll be pretty cool. But and then we see amazing water solutions for kind of the cool thing about Siemens is because we're in so many countries. Some countries have very basic needs, and so they focus on very basic things. Things like in parts of the world where there isn't good, clean access to water, and our Water Technologies division was able to develop a way to process locally, economically polluted water for clean water. And this has made a huge difference in local communities. I saw a clip on, I forget exactly where it was, I think on the Pacific Rim, where the villages fish at night by lanterns, and it's a real problem getting fuel oil and all that. And by just helping them with being able to generate light themselves, it's made a huge difference in their lives, and they don't have problems of, it was really nasty, all this oil and pollutants that they were using in a very crude way in their local fishing villages. So there's big things like in London, there's little things, there's, you know, I wish I had a more complete answer, but there are many, many, many things that Siemens do on sustainability. Thanks.
So much for being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you.